Hello, welcome to an introduction to setting up the simulator to work with Spectre. In this presentation I'm going to explain how to set up ShipSim, how to connect it to Spectre so that Spectre can control it, and how to connect Spectre to the front-end operator workstation so you can start sending commands and controlling the boat through the autopilot. So Spectre controls the virtual ship and you control Spectre. Using a real vessel, it's very much the same sort of idea. You have an operator workstation, you send commands to an autopilot that then does the rapid thinking and following headings and so on, but you give commands to the vessel. But the other part of it, which is just as important, is that you've got to get data out of the autopilot to come back to you to give you situational awareness. Without that, you're driving blind. So the whole architecture using the simulator looks something like this. On the left hand side you've got your operator workstation. This is software that you will be writing. In this presentation I'm going to use a simple terminal front end just to show you the commands that go out and the data that comes back. It's up to you to turn that into something which gives you situational awareness and allows you to send commands quickly and easily and automate the whole process of following waypoints and so on. Behind the autopilot is the boat. In this case we're going to use a simulator instead of the real boat, so that you can do the entire thing in the lab and you can make sure that all your commands work. But the very important point is that the autopilot is exactly the same piece of kit as you will be using on the lake. Let's have a look at the simulator itself. Okay, so this is ShipSim. This is what we're going to use to provide a virtual ship that we can drive around using the autopilot and exercise algorithms. On the plan view here we've got the ship right in the middle, and if we zoom right in you can see that a little bit more clearly. And here we've got a set of controls, individual sliders for the port and starboard prop, so I can do that, and you can see the thing, the port prop is spinning, so it pushes it forwards and starts turning. But a rather more convenient way of controlling the boat is to use what we call XY steer, where we push X forwards, Y sideways and steering. And that way we can use the overall thrust slider here, which does both props together, and the steering, which will apply differential thrust and get it to turn. Okay, so we've got the boat trundling around, and the next step is that we've got to get data in and out of ShipSim for it to do a useful job for us. So for that we need communications, so we select the comms menu, or we press this comms button down here, and that will open the overall comms dialog. And we've got one channel that's already defined. You can do others if you want. This one here is selected to be a serial device on this address. We can configure that. We can select one or other port here, and having selected it we can do start, and when we've done start the port is now open. We can stop and start there. So we've got receive and transmit tabs here. On the receive tab we can see out of all these possible NEMA sentences which ones we've got selected for receive. It's selected, but there is no data coming in at the moment. This MCO sentence is what we'll be using later to send machinery orders from the Spectre autopilot into the simulator. On the transmit tab we have various sentences going out, and we've got HDT, which is heading true, coming out at 1 Hertz, and RMC, which is GPS data, and rate of turn, coming out at 50 millisecond intervals, so 20 times a second. If I unpause the display, you can see it's scrolling because all that data is streaming out of the serial port at the moment. So I'll close that for a moment, and just to prove that it really is coming out of the onto a serial port where we can put it into the autopilot, what I've done here is to get a pair of DB9 connectors, and I've looped the pins 2 and 3, which are the receive and transmit from this device here, into the transmit and receive on the other side. So I'm looping the data back in through another serial port. And I can open HTerm, which is a serial terminal program that we've got, and I can select port number 2, which is this one here, and if I start that, you can see the data is streaming in. So you can have a look at that data, you can analyze it, you can see that there's the lat long and course of, speed of ground, course over ground, and so on. You can also log the data and then analyze it offline. It's a very, very useful piece of software. So hopefully that's shown you in a nutshell how to get the data that you want out of ShipSim, and you can then plug it into the autopilot, and I've shown you a little glimpse of how you get data back in to control the autopilot. So in the next video we're going to look at how to get those commands out of the autopilot into ShipSim so that we can start driving this boat from the autopilot. We'll also be driving the autopilot, telling the autopilot where to take the boat. Okay, so we've had a good look at ShipSim on its own. The next step is to have a look at how we can connect the autopilot to it, so that the autopilot can control the virtual ship and get navigation data back out of the simulator into the autopilot. Having done that, we can add a front-end operator workstation so that the operator can send commands to Spectre telling it where to take the virtual ship, and importantly how to get navigation data back out of Spectre into the operator workstation so that you can maintain situational awareness. Now for this work, what we're going to do is we're going to use a simple serial terminal we can type commands into and see data coming straight back at us. We're going to have a look at the link between Spectre and ShipSim, and then we'll have a look at how to send commands, what commands to send and what responses we expect, and how to get that navigation data back out. So let's have a look at how to plug all those things together and verify that they are working. Go to connect power, connect communications to both sides from Spectre to ShipSim and to the operator workstation, verify that they're working, start ShipSim, and let's get going, sending commands to Spectre and controlling it. So let's set up the connections for power and data for this system. Let's try step 1. Step 1, connect power to Spectre. So here is Spectre, power goes into that pin there, that one there, which is 2 pins, and that looks as though it's going to be this connector here. So it'll only go one way because there's a little notch, and we do that up. So that's fine, that's all connected up. Next, connect up the RS232 5-pin connector to COM 2 of Spectre, and the DB9 into the USB serial module. So here is the 5-pin. Again, there's a little notch at the top, so we put that in there, do it up, that's locked, and we take the other end of that cable, and the other end, and here is a DB9. So that DB9 is serial communications, is absolutely standard pinout, and that goes into number 1 here of the USB serial module. That's good. We're doing well. So same again to the next connectors. So let's find the other lead, and here it is. Same again, and it goes into the next one there. Now, just a little word of caution. You notice that on the bottom edge there are 2 more connectors. Look pretty similar to these ones, but they've got 6 pins. They're expecting 6 pins. Those are RS422 instead of 232, which is in the top ones. So don't use these 2. Okay, so we've done the third one. Finally, we plug in the DB9 into the next one here. That's good. Making progress. Verify communications. How do we verify communications? The way we're going to do that is by sending some very simple commands into the autopilot and see whether it responds. We start off with something very simple. We just start with the terminal program, hterm, and we open a serial port, which is the first one. That's where we plugged in our first cable. And select that and click start. So that port is now open. And what we're going to do is send a command which gets a response. And the easiest command to send is this send config start. Click that, and it will send this special command to the autopilot. The autopilot on any port, so long as the baud rate is right and you're connected, it will respond by going into config mode, and it'll tell you that you are connected to port 2. So that's great. That's confirmed communications both ways. If we click that, it goes back into normal mode. So that's fine. We've verified the first connection. To do the second one, yeah, you guessed it, we go to the other port. Exactly the same start, and this time, yeah, it's on port 3. And send config mode stop. So we've now verified that we have communications both ways on both of those ports to the DB9s through the USB module into the PC. Okay, so the next step is to start ShipSim. Here's ShipSim, and what you have to do is to click this external control button. So we engage that, and it starts flashing, which means it's looking for MCO data, commands, machinery orders from Spectre. The fact that is flashing means that those commands are not coming in. So two things could be happening. It could be that the port is not open, and the port is open. You can see that there's data there, but there's nothing coming in. And the other thing that could happen is maybe in your setting things up, you've forgotten to power it up. So I've just powered up Spectre, and look, the data is starting to come in, and that is now steady green, which means we've got data coming in. We can look at that data. It's MCO data. You can't see it, but it's actually scrolling past. It's unchanging. The other thing that can happen is that it's coming out of Spectre, but on the wrong Spectre port. So if you right click on this external control button, that port there specifies which Spectre port it's supposed to come out on. Make sure that says 3, and if necessary press send. Okay, so you will end up with a steady green on that light. So we've started ShipSim. We've got data coming in, and the next step is going to be to send commands to Spectre and see the effects on ShipSim. So let's have a look at the data that's coming in, and then we can see the data coming in there, and it'll be reflected on those sliders. We'll use hterm, which is already connected to Spectre, and we're not in config mode, so we can send various commands into Spectre. So the first command we're going to send is the command to put it into XY steer mode, and we what we've done is to put that in there, and I've checked this +CS checkbox, which adds the checksum to that sentence, so I don't have to calculate it and add it manually. And we've sent it in, and we get an acknowledge coming back from Spectre, acknowledge APN sentence, error code 0, which means no errors at all. These commands I'm cutting and pasting from this document, commands to Spectre, which where we've prepared a few commands, example commands that you can copy and paste into each time. So now we've got it into XY steer mode. Let's give it some thrust. So the next command is designed to give it 25% forward thrust. So we replace that with this new command, press send, and immediately you can see we've got 25% on both port and starboard, and as you can see the slide has gone up. So you can see the data is coming in there. You can watch the data if you really want, and you can see the effect on Spectre on ShipSim. Okay. The next thing, let's just for the fun of it, let's take the modify that command and give it some steering input as well. So 20% on steering. Notice it's not the last one, it's the third one from the end. So press that, and we've got differential steering, and the boat is turning. Okay. So far so good. Let's put it into auto heading mode. So what we do is take the next of those commands and plug it in there. And what happens when you go into auto heading mode is that Spectre will take a snapshot of the current heading and use that as its set point. So 115 degrees. So it's now going to try and steady on what it thought the heading was at that time, which is about 115. So it overshot a little bit, but it's steadying up on the value that it had at the time when we sent that command. We can set a new heading if we want. We can set the heading to 45 degrees. There it is, and send that, and you'll see the boat turn. Lots of differential thrust, and it turns towards 45 degrees, and it'll overshoot a little bit and then come back onto 045. This autopilot not perfectly tuned for this simulated boat, but it's not too bad. It's setting pretty much on 45 degrees. And if we look at the plan view, we can see it's done its turn, and that's a pretty acceptable turn. So in summary then, we have connected ShipSim, we are giving commands to the autopilot, and we're seeing that the autopilot is now controlling the ship. So now is the time for you to send those commands from your software to send the simulated boat round some chosen waypoints. Okay, now so we've got commands going into Spectre. Spectre is commanding the ship, the virtual ship in this case. The ship is sending back sensor data, navigation data, GPS and heading and so on back to Spectre. There's one thing missing. It's absolutely essential that you get some of that navigation data back into your front end. Otherwise, you're driving blind. You need to have a situational awareness, and you need to plot the position and course of the boat and the heading of the boat on your chart or your plan view. So the first step is you've got to get hold of that data. So we can do that. There is a NEMA command called NVO, which allows you to request data out of port number 2. And I'll put this one in. It's NVO, which stands for Navigation Data Output, and port 2. 1.0 is the interval between heading fixes, and the other zeros are something to do with collision avoidance, which we're not using in this case, but you're just going to have those fields filled in. And as soon as we send that, here we go. We've got all that lovely data coming back to us, so we can use that to maintain our situational awareness. Now, that's really useful when you're running, but when you're experimenting, sending commands and seeing what's happening, it kind of gets in the way because you can't see the responses from your commands coming back at you. So you might just want to turn that off. So all you have to do is turn that 2 into a 0, send it again, and that stops. And now, once again, when you send commands, you just get the responses and you can see exactly what's going on. All these commands that I've been talking about, we've put them into a little summary of a few example commands that you can copy and paste into HTerm and just to get the thing running. But they are all listed in the manual, which looks something like this. And in this manual you'll see there's a whole list of all the possible sentences that you can send. There's the MVO sentence, there you go, on page 20 and so on. And they're all defined in this document. It's a very long document, but actually for your work you only need a small fraction of these sentences, so please don't be intimidated. So finally, in summary, we've now got thrusts, commands going in. You can put it on a heading, it'll control the boat returns data to Spectre, and I've shown you how to get the data out. So as promised, I've explained how to set up ShipSim and Spectre and a front-end operator workstation. We've used HTerm. It's up to you to create something more useful from HTerm, something which will send it around waypoints automatically and so on. So Spectre is controlling the ship and you are controlling Spectre. Over to you. Good luck.